All right, brothers and sisters. Um, the doctrine we shall be dealing with. The title of this is called "Is Jesus Black?" Yeah, you know, it appears to me, according to my limited of knowledge, that there's like three popular, you know, images of Jesus. That being said, we have the blonde haired, blue eyed Jesus, which seems no longer popular in America. But there's this guy, he's like 6 foot something, dark brown eyes, brunette hair, long face, that guy, right? Um, then there's this Jesus. I mean, he's really Jesus got dreadlocks. Jesus look like me, you know what I'm saying, with dreadlocks. Excuse me for my demeanor right now. Some people may not find this subject matter to be quite funny. I laugh at practically whatever the spirit moves me to laugh at, whether it's humorous or not. Nevertheless, um, I want to go here. I would like us to go to Deuteronomies. Now, before we go there, we go to Exodus. It says, remember, King James Version is where we're reading from. King James Version is the most accurate translation, far as the translation, the popular that's in the major circulation is the most accurate. Exodus 20, verse 24. Cool. All right. You shall not make any graven image. Right. Oh, okay. So shouldn't be making pictures and images of Jesus in the first place. So let's knock all that stuff down. Let's knock all that down. All right. Boom. So you're not supposed to be making images of Jesus, and then this would people argument would end at that. We ain't supposed to be making images of Jesus anyways. It doesn't matter what he looks like. He loved us all. However, I do want to discuss the fact of I want to deal with the psychosis dealing with this nature of this. It was deliberately done. A lot of things were deliberately done. Prime example, I would tell you some things on my end, give you some personal things on my end. Personal testimonies always help. Um, I have a niece, right? So I have a 4-year-old niece, and she she's fond more of she is black, by the way. Both her parents are, African descent. Um, she's a more fond to deal with, you know, European descent children, white looking kids, than she is of other kids. In fact, just white people, pretty much, she would call them pretty and acknowledge them more as far as strangers go versus if a stranger's child or the stranger themselves who is black who approached them. In fact, sometimes she would act very shy or hide behind one of us. Um, there's a lot of things that play a role in that. For example, when this child sees everything good in their eyes is being white, for example, the Barbie dolls are white, the Barbie dolls little got blonde hair, brunette, whatever European descent, but the Cinderella, the princess is white. The backpack got images of white girls on it. The shirt is a white girl. The tennis shoes got white girl stuff on there. When all they see, everything is being beautiful, everything grandiose, extravagant, is all European descent. When the Barbie doll that they got to take care and brush head all day, you know, uh, do I need to say, the psychological effect it has there? Um, my point, my thing is this: it's been socially engineered. The same thing as them depicting Jesus. See, It goes beyond the extent some of my brothers and sisters will say, well, Jamal, everybody wants to make a depiction of their God in their own image. Rightfully saying that a lot of people have that, whatever you want to call it, pet peeve, stigma, whatever you want to use. Rightfully so, many people, take up that disposition. However, some are socially engineering it because it has nothing to do with how they view their God, but more so how you view what God is. It's about supremacy. See, when you make a depiction of God looking like my uncle, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem like you would feel bad with being in subjection to me. My God is my uncle or looks like my uncle. You see what I'm saying? The same way as if a child highly esteems, um, you know, your Obama, and she went to school with like Obama's kids. There's gonna be this all around, envy, and there's gonna be this sense of superiority when it comes to the children. So it was for that intent. Why that was there. Like the fact Caesar Borgia, well, if I'm not pronouncing his name right, that's the guy with the blonde, with the brunette. There was an actual human being they use they use a person. If that's not an abomination, then please tell me, because if we go to Deuteronomy's um 12, it talks about these heathens. It says Deuteronomy 12 verse 30, and that you inquire not after their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. And again, let us go down to chapter 20 in Deuteronomy's verse 18, that they teach you not to do after all their abominations which they had unto their gods. So should you sin. So should you sin against the eternal your God. See, now this is what I try to explain to people, because here what comes. This is why this subject matter is important, because here what happens. It leaves room for ignorance, even on our behalf. So what end up happening is that you have these brothers saying, well, see, Jamal, or see such and such, this is a white man's religion. This is the white man's God. They use these travesties as an excuse to say that, the book was contrived by the Europeans. They used it to enslave us. They quote from some of these ludicrous but half logical scholars of ours. Yes, I'm going there, because that's how I feel right now. Who says that they came into the land with they came in the land with religion and they left with the land. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just sounds absurd. Act as if we wasn't religious before we even met a European. You know, um, the reality of the situation is that this could be the infallible truth. But truth can be used to oppress people. Yeah, truth can set you free, but truth can be used to enslave you. That's just like if I know some secrets about you, although they may be true, what is the intentions behind me exposing them? You dig this? And even in this book, it can be fabricated. A truth can be wrapped up and concealed. It's called indoctrination. It's called dissimulation. So please let us not go there. Let us not try to play these little Jedi mind games to buy out or try to distort something that we really even understand ourselves. And seeing that we're talking about the subject matter, I'm referring to this Bible. Nevertheless, let us deal with the travesties. Let us deconstruct all these fabricated stories and illusory theories about what God looks like and what Jesus looks like. Because first of all, there was no evidence of Jesus, like appearance. There was no body parts left, none of this. So for you to try to paint a picture of Jesus, I mean, especially after the scripture says you're not supposed to make no graven images and not serve how the heathen serves them, which should be in question is not whether you're doing something wrong. According to the scripture, that's evident, is what is your intentions. So that's what I wanted to point out first. Um, it was all socially engineered. The same way we do that too. Now with the same objective, our people are making this image of Jesus now. So before I go on to that point, I want to just say that my conclusion basically is none of them look. This is not accurate. If there was a depiction of Jesus, no, none of the three popular ones are great depictions of Jesus. Point blank, period. It's being the unbiased true witness of Christ, of God. Um, None of these depictions of Jesus are even accurate. On that elevated note, I will now go back to addressing our brothers and sisters who tries to Negronize everything. Yeah, blackenize everything, falling in the footsteps of the oppressor. Jesus with dreadlocks. Come on, son. Really though, in Palestine, Jesus with dreadlocks. If we look in the ancient Egyptian dynasties, there was only about like one or two dynasties where the kings had dreadlocks. It wasn't even popular during this time, but they say, oh, because Jesus was a Nazarene. Come on, man. If you know the practice of a Nazarite, you're a Nazarite only for a certain point. Then you cut your hair off after you filled your consignment. So let us be for real, man. Jesus was not no. All right. Nevertheless, let me stay back on the focus which I was on. The passage that they try to use is Revelations. We're going to the book of Revelations here. Matter of fact, let us go to Daniel first, right? Because I know what, I know how it goes. Let's go to Dan. Remember, brothers and sisters, although I'm using the attitude I'm having, you know, um, if I'm wrong, let God please correct me about my attitude. But let us just be unbiased to the truth. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. Some people, this is a sensitive topic. To me, everything about the Bible is very sensitive. But ignorance is not something that I have compassion for. Verse 6, his body, Daniel 10, verse 6, his body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Okay. Okay. Revelations 1. Mm, I'm sorry. All right. Anyways, let's see. I don't got it up there. Okay, brothers and sisters. We go to Revelations 1. And Revelations 1 says in verse 14, and his head and his hairs were white like wool, white as snow, and his eyes as a flaming fire. Oh, let's stop there. You know, our brothers and sisters have a tendency to say, well, Jamal, the Bible says Jesus is black. And I'd be like, where? You know, where? um, because that'd be the very only passage I ever missed. And they say in Revelations 1, verse 14, it talks about his head being thick like wool. Whoa. Look, Holmes, I don't even think there is a translation that says thick. There's no translation, no matter how distorted these translations are out here. There's no translation, right, that has the audacity to change that passage up for the benefit of us. We're doing what the oppressor do. We're trying to manipulate something for your benefit. What is being described here, right? Matter of fact, what's being depicted here is they're comparing the color, not the texture. It says his head and his hairs were white like wool, not thick like wool. And then it even puts overemphasis, white as snow. You see what I'm saying? It says here, white like wool, white as snow. It is comparing the color and not the texture of his hair. Okay? Now, yes, I'm going to go to the next verse because I know everybody talk about, well, what about his legs and all that stuff. All right. First, I just want to let y'all know, give you a little bit of background. First, we're going to start off with the the instrument that was used for this passage. In this case, it would be one of the 12 disciples. the most beloved disciple that laid on the breast of Jesus. This disciple name was John. He also wrote the Gospel of John. This disciple, from my understanding, was on the islands of Patmos when he wrote this. He was in prison, I guess, waiting to die. Um, Nevertheless, this was a vision that was given onto him, right? And see, with that being said, Revelations is what then a prophecy. That's why it's called Revelations, right? Or Revelation. Because this was a prophet. This was a vision that was given to him while he was on the island of Patmos, right? And in his vision, he said that he seen, Christ. And I'm here to tell you, brothers and sisters, that he seen Christ in the glory in which Christ had with the Father before he was manifested in the flesh as Christ Jesus, right? As it is written in John 17, verse 5, and now, Father, glorify you me with your own self, with the glory which I had with you before the world was. Because we got to remember in John's verse 1, chapter 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You go down to verse 14, it tells you that, and the Word was made flesh. And this word is talking, and the word is Christ. Yeah, that's Christ. Christ is the word manifested in the flesh, and what he's seen Christ in his glory when he was the word. Christ returned onto his glory, as in John, Gospel of John's in chapter 17 talks about him returning onto the glory, the glory he had with the Father before earth was. So now you see him in his glory. The same way, if you go into Daniel's chapter 10 verse 6, it is describing Christ here. This is the Son of Man. Before he was man, this is the Word who sat at the right hand of the Father before the foundations of the universe was even laid. He was there, and it's depicting the glory here. You see what I'm saying? This is not the appearance of a human being. No human being walks around with eyes with flaming fire. You know what I'm saying? No human being walks around with arms glowing. I got metallic complexion. The camera's not good, but my skin is copper metallic. This makes me look a little bit lighter than what I actually am. I'm copper. I'm copper skin, but metallic though. So that means it casts a reflection. There's a reflection off me, right? And even with this type of reflection, this is not a poetic passage here. You know what I'm saying? It's talking about literally being like the burning bronze and flames of fire. I don't look like no burning bronze or flames of fire. You understand what I'm saying? This right here is a revelations. This is a vision that was given to John on the island of Patmos. So with that token, I want the brothers and sisters to understand that it's not good to sit here and do what the oppressor does. Because to me, I think it would just be quite simple, like to even disregard the notion of Jesus being black. At least trying to use Revelations as a supporting scripture for that. It says white as white as wool, white as snow. But nevertheless, now let us go into some historical content. Let us look at the Semitic line. You had Ham, Shem, and Japheth. All the Semitic lines, like Arab, we got to look at the language. People say, oh, so how you know who's who? So if you look at the language, Hebrew is a Semitic language, Aramaic is a Semitic language, Arabic is a Semitic language, and we can go down the list. These are Asiatic individuals. These Asiatic individuals are not black. These Asiatic individuals are not black. Some of them, like all of us, has intermingled from the earliest of times. Like it describes the son of Ishmael. Ishmael, being of the Semitic line, went and had an Egyptian wife. Thus, you had the development of, excuse me, Saudi Arabia, the 12 princes. And these 12 princes were of Saudi, the son of the Saudis. These were these individuals. They were a mixture. These were the Arabs. These are original Arabs, the merchants that went out there. That's how they expanded their empire. They were mixed type of individuals, but you are the bloodline of your father. Their father was Ishmael. These are Semites. Thus, these individuals were Asiatics. But the most popular of Asiatics were those of tan skin. They were not black. Um, with that being on that note, we can further just move forward to dealing with Abraham. Abraham deliberately had incense. Remember, Abraham married his sister, right? Then his son married his cousin. His son is Yakub. No, his son is Isaac. Um, yeah, and then Jacob, right? And Isaac married his cousin, and Israel, Jacob, married his cousin. You see what I'm saying? And then with having the 12 sons, they, the sisters and all that type of stuff, they all married and multiplied and multiplied. They were trying to keep, they kept, for the most part during that time, all the way up to the 70 lives. They kept predominantly a pure race, so it was for the intent that Christ come through this pure race. Um, far as the bloodline goes, there was an intentions behind that. So it was deliberately, designed and orchestrated that Christ come through this line, this dynasty line, you know. So, and these individuals were not black. A lot of people say, well, what about the underground pictures and features in the Roman Catholic church to describe that depicts the disciples as being black? Well, they were African disciples. Simon, one, and I'm not gonna say one of the Peters, but there was a few others which I can't remember the names, so I don't want to be quote saying anything false. But there were several disciples. I'm talking about main disciples that were African. Um, Nevertheless, people try to use another argument saying about, well, then how did Jesus was able to blend in when he went to Egypt? Man, first of all, Jesus went to Egypt when he was a baby. Egypt is hot. You see what I'm saying? And plus, let's look at the time. Forget Egypt being hot. My bad. I'm following after their ignorance. I know history, so I don't even have to speculate. Man, if we look at the time in which Jesus was supposed to came, then man, Egypt didn't even look like Egypt. You see what I'm saying? This is my field. This is my field. Ancient Egyptian history and spirituality, that's my field right here. And I'm here to tell you that Holmes, from the beginning of the dynasty of times, we talk about King Menes since the dynasty started. King Menes was the very first dynasty, and he was an Ethiopian delegate, soldier, general. He was high up there. I don't know if he was like a kingsman, but he was from Ethiopia, and he came to re-conquer because Egypt used to be under the Ethiopian kingdom. People didn't know that. It was just a branch of the ancient Ethiopian kingdom. Nevertheless, he came to conquer Ethiopia, and ancient Egypt, and it was divided during that time. There was a fraction during that time, and he united. He was the king, who was known for uniting Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Lower being the north, upper being the south. Nevertheless, from that point on, this is like 31 BC. There's been wars and invasions by nomads, and then when the Eurasians, the Euros come on the scene. Because remember, they wasn't on the scene when we was on the scene. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about our existence go. When they came on the scene, off bucks, they start jumping out there. And then you've seen a lot of intermingling after like the seventh, eighth dynasty. So it was mixed breeds from the earliest of times. Scholars like Chancellor Williams go reading the Black Destruction of Civilization. Um, Dr. John Henry Clark, he has to testify on that, no matter how he feels on it. I don't know if my brother, who's a superb scholar, elder of ours, Anta Sheikha Diop, talks about the mixed breed, but man, that's evident. That's not something to even like. That's not even something to like argue. And nevertheless, to talk about at the times and the dynasties where these individuals actually took over. When we look at the time of the Exodus, whether we want to talk about, matter of fact, we look at 1100 BC, 1300 BC, 1700 BC. 1300 BC was Akhenaten, the Great Reformer. He was mixed. Um, he was a mixed breed. 1700 BC actually was taken over by the Ramesses. They were not African. You know what I'm saying? There were several different. Cleopatra was not African. So and we talking about a time where, come on, Holmes, the like, you know what I mean? Like, you had a multicultural there in Africa. You look at the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts, racism didn't exist amongst us. We didn't have a problem being amongst all these different types of people. You know, we went by classification of people was by, the intellect, by the spirit versus, by your color. We did recognize the differences in different races, and we did have a philosophy that I'm not going to touch on that. But nevertheless, my point is that, like, people try to say, well, he had to been dark skinned in order for him to blend in Egypt. No, Egypt was one of the most multicultural places during that time, in a place that was already being overtaken by these foreigners, by these heathens, so, like, come on, man. So, like, we just slaughtered that, now that that's out the way, what else do we have to address concerning this matter? All right, so now we can take it to, let's focus just more on the identity dealing with the tribes. Um, the thing of it is this is that this part now will have to continue on to another series. Um, the original people looked at like, I mean, I'm sorry to use the word original, but original people looks like me and you. I mean, excuse me. I'm assuming that most people who are looking at this are black, so I might be very presumptuous and highly ignorant for such an assumption. But nevertheless, I assume that because a lot of the people I asked to watch this video, looked like me and you, because they are, they're part of the subject. Um, with that being said, Adam and Eve look like me and you from Adam to Noah. Historical scientific artifacts supports that. And I said that to say, not to extol us, not to put us on those pedestal. And my next comment is not to offend nobody, but it's an insult to try to call yourself a Jew by pedigree. We are spiritual Jews, as it says in Romans, but it's an insult to yourself. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to try to blackenize everything. Your culture is already enriched. It's an insult because simply we never been no nomads. We were highly esteemed people, but we fell just like how Lucifer fell. We corrupted our wisdom by reason of our beauty and intellect. And that's how we fell. So God has this theme in the Bible that when this happens, he takes the lowest and he exalts them. You see what I'm saying? He exalts them to show that he can take the small things like it's all by his power and his will. All things were established and instituted by him. Man is not as great as man think he is, because the man tries to put the separate existence of himself from God. You know what I'm saying? This separate existence of self from God. How do you do that? You created in God's image and likeness. You are one God. You and God are one. But that's a whole nother level. But because of those travesties, God, you know, manifested His truth onto these nomad people. You can see it. Our linguistics, our language, our culture, our sophistication during that time was all due to the relationship that we had with God. These people were cave dwellers. You know what I'm saying? Cave dwellers and all types of foreign stuff was going on with them. But then as soon as God came in their life, you know what I'm saying? They committed the same act that we committed because they were without the spirit that we were without. The spirit that can ultimately give us that level of humility that we need. And that's the Holy Spirit of God, which is the power and essence of God, not a personification which they stole from Africa. On that controversial, highly agitative note, I will just finish it off, like how we had taught in paragraphs, the ending statement, kind of reflect the beginning. So, like we already touched on, Yeah, Caesar Borgio. Excuse me, I'm not gonna try to spell it. Well, I'm gonna try to spell his name. You know how to spell Caesar. I think Borgio is Borgio. Um, that's the individual that they tried. They that Michelangelo, I believe, depicted, and things of this nature. And it was socially engineered to make us feel that God is some white God, so that we would feel that white is supreme. Just like they socially engineered that everything great, is from European, and even try to steal, African history. Not all white people are like that. Because at one point in time there wasn't no racism amongst the white people, like during Herodotus time, Diocletian's times. These people actually installed, marveled at the great works of the Africans and went down there. In fact, Socrates told his students, and one of his soaring pupils was Plato, that it was mandatory that if you was a philosopher or scholar that you had to take a trip to Egypt. Um, and my brothers and sisters, please stop saying, Jesus is black because of Revelations 1. You know what I'm saying? It says white as wool, white as snow. I went to the other passage because Daniel's, they try to talk about the legs, the burning bronze, and things of this nature. But there's even another level to that. You know what I'm saying? The colors that it uses and stuff like that. I want to even, matter of fact, let me even talk about the melanin. I didn't want to go past 30 minutes, but oh well. Let us even talk about this melanin. You know, um, let us even talk about the color dynamics of things. White does represent purity. That's without a doubt. That's the reason why it was used. Like, even in fact, when you burn a hair cell, take a dreadlock or take a group, if somebody's cutting their hair or something like that, when you cut your hair, take it and burn it. It turns from black, orange, then white. You see what I'm saying? But nevertheless, when you look at resin, when you look at grapes, when you look at grains, the darker it is, the more potent it is. You see what I'm saying? But because there's a duality here, not necessarily the polarity. We're not looking at the influx. We're looking at the duality here, and in the yin and yang symbol, which is a act was which they got from their fathers, which is us. The first Chinese dynasty was African. The black and white. There's power in both of them. There's the where's that little thing where you can actually see through the glass and all the seven colors pop out? But y'all know what I'm talking about. It comes out of the colors comes out of the dark matter, and the white bright light makes it emanate, makes it manifest. See, there's two roles and functions that both of these powerful contrasts have, to the point where black and white are not even considered colors for this very reason. You see what I'm saying? So it's like it's deep. Is deep. We're using racism and we getting caught up in racism about two things which they're not even colors, and they're both as important and as essential to one of another, that they coexist like space and time. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, let's study. I don't even really want to even focus on this because it can go so many different ways, and I will have to do a book and an essay and sermons on each of these different points. But if you get all these other points, it will keep you from being in this position that most of us are in, defending one side from the other, or both two ignorances, one lesser of a worse evil. You see what I'm saying? On that note, my brothers and sisters, I would just like to touch on the revelations. Like I said, he was on the islands of Patmos, and he was given a vision, and he seen Jesus in the glory that he had with the Father before the earth was. I'm going back to John's 15 verse 5. And now, Father, glorify you me with your own self, with the glory which I had with you before the world was. So, and then I just want to go ahead and hit you off with Proverbs 8, um, verse 23. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or the earth ever was. On that note, brothers and sisters, y'all be blessed. Um, my Christians, brothers and sisters, um, be encouraged, do many exploits.